All right, what we're doing today is we're talking about workforce development, right? That's the reason you're here. Let's talk a little bit more about, you've got some rock stars that are working with you. Mariella is awesome from her work back in Decatur, but you forgot that we met, right?
No.
Oh, you would never forget me, right? Yeah, that's right. Don't say that. But what we're doing is we're talking about key issues of transforming workforce development in this region. And the way we're going to talk about that today is to see just some of the things that we've done, and I can talk about some of the things that are happening in other regions. But I want to preface everything that I'm saying right here and right now is that this region is different than Region 3. It's different than Region 9. Every region is different because we have different industries, we have different leadership models, you have different physical agents. And so when you see what I'm talking about today, I want you to always keep in your mind that Donny is talking about what is happening in his region, and then how can we take some of those best practices and migrate them into what we can do here in this region. Now, when we talk about what it takes to have an effective workforce system, I'm going to say that what I'm fixing to tell you is across every region. How many industries do we have in the room? Would you raise your hand? Why are you raising your hand like you're not proud of it? All right, if you're a region, raise your hand. All right, I've been in industry, raise your hand. All right, very good. Now, did everybody just see how many hands were raised? This is indicative of a lot of the workforce systems that we have in the state of Alabama. The minority of the groups that are engaged is industry. And the majority of the groups that are engaged are providers. How many of you would consider yourself a provider in the room that provide workforce development services? All right. How many are you here and you don't really know why you're here? You came to the wrong room, okay? Because some of you didn't raise your hand, so you're kind of confusing me. But what I want you to feel comfortable with is know that I'm not ever going to run for an elected position. I work at a chamber. I work with those guys every day. I don't ever want to be one. I'm not here to try to win over anybody. I'm here to help. And so some of the things that I say might not be politically correct. Some of the things that I say might make you, the bristles on your back stand up. But what I'm trying to do today is to help you understand the impact that you guys have the ability sitting in this room to make for the citizens of this region. And that's what it's all about. The success of the industries, the livelihood of our citizens, and the growth of our economy. That's what it's all about, folks. And it's not about egos. It's not about whose turf. And I don't know about you guys, but in our region, one of the biggest issues were silos. Silos and turfs. And so what we have been working for the last 2 years is to tear those down. Some of those have been with sledgehammers, and some of those have been very easy. But it's got to be where the people who are involved in workforce development finally step back and say, it's not about me, it's about others. Somebody asked me many years ago, and I was also a youth pastor, and they said, what's the difference in being an effective person who makes a difference in the lives of others? And we use this saying in our regional council meeting. The difference between a successful workforce development system and one that's not is 18 inches. Now I want you to understand this, and you'll see why everything that I talk about in just a few minutes deals with 18 inches. The difference between a successful workforce development system is 18 inches. That is the difference or the distance between here and here. I'll take up an offering when I'm finished. But I want you guys to understand this. If you're in it because it's your job, you'll never be successful. If you're in it as a provider because it's just something that we've always done and it's how we get our grant money and it's numbers we have to achieve, I promise you, you'll never be successful. If you're here as an industry and you want to make a difference in the lives of those who are employed at your office, or your business, your industry, and you want that production to increase, these are the things that you need to listen to. because we can help you. The state is coming on board. You have a great resource with Lisa and the whole team at AIDT, with Commerce, with the Department of Labor. All of these guys, post-secondary, higher ed, K-12, they're all engaged. And I want you to know that you have resources that you can pull, and that's some of the things that we've done. What I thought I would do real quick is talk about, and don't get me wrong when I say what I'm fixing to say, you need to have this statistical data to make strong decisions. But where the rubber meets the road and where this is really going to make an impact is you guys rolling up your sleeves, getting into clusters, and working together to make things happen. And I'm going to give you examples of how that works. But let's talk about where our issues are as a state. If you look real quick, we have about 4.8 million Alabamians. And I stole this from Ed Castile's presentation in Philip Cleveland several weeks ago. 32,000 citizens currently incarcerated in prisons. Almost 500,000 working age adults in Alabama without high school credentials. 500,000 people in our state. 500,000 underemployed. Almost 800,000 job openings between 2010 and 2020. But here's the scary part, if you're in the industry. 50% of workers right now are eligible to retire. Now, look right here, 114,000 shortfall in workforce development. 218 by 2030. Now the problem a lot of times with workforce development, and we'll talk about how we work in Region 3, but we focus so much on what's going on today. How do we make an impact today? If we don't start focusing on that bottom number, it's going to be detrimental to our state. Now let me give you an example. I know this and I preach it every single day and every time I meet with any of our industry leaders. By the year 2020 in Region 3, we have a 14,000 deficit that is projected, and probably some of your report will show some of these numbers, but 14,000 deficit. Now it doesn't matter, right now I'm going to say it doesn't matter, but it's not all encompassing when we look at data and say we have this number in unemployment and how do we move them. The scary part is in the coming years we're going to have a deficit. So we better be working not only to recruit, but also take all of those and elevate those who are not in the workforce up to a level where they can be. Because if not, when we get to 2020, we're going to be saying, where are the people? And some of you are probably saying that right now. Is that true? Where is the workforce? In this region, if you look at your statistical data that was posted by post-secondary on your website, on the state website for Region 1, your number is 12,000. So right now, in your region, if I took that number, you will have, if projected correctly by CBER, the Center for Business Economic Research at the University of Alabama, a 12,000 deficit, employee deficit, by the year 2020. And when I say those numbers, a lot of times the industry goes, I didn't realize that. So it's crucial that industry drive what we're doing. Now as we keep on, we're seeing some other numbers that are very important. Number one, skills gaps, right? We're talking about where we're at from a state level. If you begin to look at it, higher skilled jobs, which are your 4-year degrees, you can see the blue line is how many jobs we have. See the light blue line under it? That's how many workers we have that we're graduating from the universities. What does that tell us? We're graduating more than we have jobs. If you go to Mercedes-Benz, you'll find that there are a lot of 4-year degreed individuals who are working on the assembly line. There's nothing wrong with that. But what if they had had those 4 years to actually go straight into that job? Now let's look at the bottom part, low-skilled jobs. Do you see the number of jobs? Well, look at the number of workers that we have. Now look at the middle. That's where our sweet spot is. In this region and in our region is that middle skilled jobs. That's our assembly workers and some of those types of jobs. That even has a lot of health care in it. But look at the number of jobs that we have, which is the red, and look at the bar under it. So what this tells me is the only way that we're going to be successful as a state is to move the gray line up and the blue line, in some sense, down. That's what workforce development is having a skilled ability to look at, where we're going, do the analysis, sell people on it, and then let them know what we're going to do to get there. So how do we do this? We look at several things. Skills gaps, you're on your road to already finding the information that you need. The retirement bubble, how many of those are we going to have in our region? The problem that we're having also is less fifth graders. What that means is there's going to be less graduates to meet that 2020 goal. And then, of course, skilled trades folks, and we need workers with soft skills or essential skills. That's something that we hear across the country. People don't know how to what? Show up on time. They don't know how to be punctual, to be honest, to communicate, those types of things. Now, as we go through this real quick, we can also see that there's key issues. Now, this is two-year colleges. President, don't get mad at me on this, but this is y'all's data, okay? We go way back. He was, I just want y'all to know that he was one of my first educators in my college work. Let's wait till the end of this and look, y'all blame him, okay? That's not me. It's all his fault. Now, when you look at all this, look at what we're seeing. The data that we just gave, when we start looking at the key issues that we have, home health care in the state, healthcare providers, software developers, all the things that you just reported on, right? Now look at the real data. The kids who are going into two-year degrees in the state of Alabama, look at the number for general studies and undeclared. Do you see how that matches up? It doesn't. That's where workforce development is.
Donny, I hate to interrupt you, but I'll show you this at your regional level.
Absolutely, that's great.
So,
this is the same thing for four-year degrees. How many of you have a four-year degree in here? Anybody? Oh, a few of you. Woo, I'm going to make all of y'all mad. Oh, I apologize right now before I get through with this, okay? But I want you guys to understand something. How many of you changed your major at least once? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's usually statistically correct. Look at what we need in the state versus how many students and the large percentage of students who are undecided or undeclared. That means they're going into college and don't even understand where they're going and what they're doing. They just were told, Mom said I had to get a four-year degree. My counselor said to be successful I have to have a four-year degree. And that's not going to help. So let's talk about, we're looking at these statistics and we're talking about these issues. So how do we fix them? How do we begin to move the needle? Traditionally, what would happen is you would have providers, and I'm going to pick on post-secondary and K-12, our career centers, and all that. It's not that they do anything wrong, it's just how our system was set up. Is that they would provide services, they would do the best job that they could to talk to some of their employers. They would set up programs, and usually you would have a lead company that would be kind of pushing that. And then as they would do that, then everybody else would come on board and they would wave the flag of workforce development and say, here's workforce development, come on board. And half the industries are saying, that doesn't meet my needs. And the more we talked to our industry leaders, the more we found this out. We would go into the career centers and find out the same thing. It's not that anything was done wrong, it was just that there were communication gaps. And that there wasn't a strong understanding about the needs of the entire clusters, which they just showed you what those cluster areas are for your region. So what we did was we redeveloped, and they asked, and like I said, every region's different. They moved the physical agent from post-secondary into the chamber because we decided, when I say we, I mean industry decided. Because I would go to our regional council meetings, we'd have 50 to 60 in the room with 3 industries. And we found out real quick, unless industry drives workforce development, it's never successful. You can have successes, but your system is not successful. Now, some of you in the room, because I know that I'm in the minority, you will say, wait a minute, I'm a provider. That's not correct. We had 50 kids that went through this. We had 100 kids that went through this. We made this grant. We got this money. We did this. Here's my point. If we are successful, we wouldn't be here talking today. Amen? Amen? I'm taking up an offering after this. You think I'm joking? But those are the real results, and it has nothing to do with an agency. It has nothing to do with a group. This is across the Southeast, and it's an issue that we have everywhere. So don't think that I'm pointing a finger and saying somebody's not doing their job. It's not that. It's we can do so much more together than we can apart. We can achieve more and bring in more revenue for programs that really make an impact as we communicate. So what we did was we set up a mechanism in our region to do that. First of all, it had to be about communication. Second of all, and most importantly, it had to be industry-led and driven. If you look at our regional council, our executive committee for West Alabama Works is 100% industry. 100% industry. If you look at our executive committee, it is either a vice president or the president of the company. People ask me all the time, well, who is it? And I'll just rattle some of those off. The president of Mercedes-Benz US International sits on our board and is actively involved. The plant manager at Nucor Steel, the VP at DCH Health Systems, the plant manager at BF Goodrich, one of the VPs at Hunt Refining, the owner and the president of DT and Freight and owner, the president of Maccabee Construction, and the list goes on and on. It is industry driven, and the industry makes the decisions in our region where we go and what our focus is on. And so through that, we have a regional council that is broken up of providers and industry. The majority of our regional council is also industry. About 80%, 80 to 90% of our industry regional council. Through that, we've created 5 major clusters. And you'll see those clusters right there. They're automotive, healthcare, construction, manufacturing, and professional services. What happens in our region is all of the work happens here and not at a regional council level, in a grassroots level. So in those automotive, for example, our automotive, which is probably one of our stronger, healthcare is also strong in construction and manufacturing. But you have just about every Mercedes supplier engaged in that cluster. So when they talk about the issues and they talk about it together, we know collaboratively. How many of you are in education? I know we have CTEs. Okay, very good. How many of you have, if you're in CTE work, if you're in career technical education, do you have an advisory board? All right. Industry, how much do you love going to 15 different advisory board meetings? Would you raise your hand if you like to do that? Really? You mean you have a business to run? Think about it this way. There's so many positives to this. If you're a CTE director, guess where I would go? I'd go to that meeting. And then I'd go to my business leaders and say, look, I value your time. I'm going to come to these cluster meetings. I'm going to listen to what you guys are saying. I'm going to base my decisions on what you guys say as a collaborative group. Strange concept, right? But that's how we work. The other thing that it works with is we also have state leaders that are at these meetings. And so every other month these clusters are meeting. For example, the automotive cluster might have 60, automotive cluster might be as big as this meeting right here. Because there's so much work that's being done there. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but I wanted you guys to understand industry truly is driving the information that's churning up. Then the providers then don't become the driver, they become the provider. Right? They become the provider. And it helps them so much. I'll give you an example. In our region alone, we have taken from just about $1.2, $1.3 million coming into workforce development, infused into our, Max Weaver is here. Max, can you say this works? It works. And I didn't just put you on the spot, I'm sorry. He would have said it whether it did or not. But yeah, that's right, that's right. But absolutely. For example, right now we're working on a $1.5 million grant that's a power grant. Bevel is going to be hopefully a part of that in Fayette. Shelton State will be a part of that. They've never gone after a grant like that, but we're doing it through our system. We just received a $125,000 grant to build out a technical high school. What we're doing is, it's not that we're moving control from anybody, but what we're doing is enhancing everyone. So the rising tide does what? Lifts all boats. And that's exactly what our system is built to do. And you can see, just in our automotive cluster, these are the folks who are involved. That's the power of cluster work. And then also, here are providers. And they work simultaneously to meet the needs of these guys, not vice versa. Here's how our system works real quick and how we go through this. We look at 3 major areas. These areas are very important because without the development, the pipeline, that long-term 2020 goal will never be reached, right? So as we look at that, we also see the current recruiting needs that we have. This is where a lot of us focus in workforce development. And I would probably say that the majority of your meetings in the last year or so have been focused on that middle part. And that's okay, because that's very important. But what we also have to do is understand the retaining. And that's where a lot of our nonprofit service providers come in and help and support. So here are some of the things, and I just highlighted a few of those in the development area. Technical high schools and working with CTE, our WOW event. I know that several of you guys came down and saw that this past year. Our apprenticeship program. Hopefully we've got that moving forward, and in August we'll be launching the youth and the adult apprenticeships, which the adult apprenticeship will probably launch in the next couple of weeks. We have our grant funding process. We're working right now with nonprofits to help them with funding operations. So our workforce system is helping fund nonprofit community organizations that are specifically geared towards helping and moving people from at-risk into job readiness. And then our ACT Work Ready community. This Friday we're having a press conference where we're hoping that we will be one of the first communities in the state of Alabama that actually will receive the designation of a ACT Certified Work Ready community, which deals with work keys. All right, industry, please raise your hand again for me. All right. How many of you know what work keys are? Raise your hand. Awesome. How many of you know that every graduate in the state of Alabama graduates with work keys assessments now? About half of you. It's a great tool that we can use. Most industries do not know. That'd be a great thing to put on your list of things to do. Train your industries on how that works and how they can capitalize on that service that the state of Alabama already provides. It's a great asset that you guys can use. As we look at the retaining, we have a matrix system where we're tracking over 2,600, roughly 26 to 3,000 individuals right now in our workforce system. Mobile Ready to Work unit, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Our apprenticeship programs, once again, that comes back to retraining and retooling. And then we have a Hale County training grant. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But every single one of our meetings, this is what you see. This is what our board sees, and they see what we're working on every single quarter when we have our quarterly meetings that we actually work. Our executive committee meets every month and works specifically on these. And so when I say industry driven, you have an executive committee, you have clusters that are meeting, and then you also have the regional council who is kind of an oversight and looks at everything that we're doing. And so everybody's marching to the same drum. Now, what I want to do is, I'm not going to go through all this, but you can just see some of the highlights. We've placed about 1,500 employees in the last 18 to 24 months. We're fixing to hit our 24 mark. The other thing is, like several of our regions, we're also a National Fund for Workforce site. 39 national sites, we're one of those. We brought in, and this is an older report, $2.8 million in workforce grants. That can make a big difference in a region, right? Specialized work-ready programs, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But here's just some of the results. This is how we work. Everything that we do in our workforce system is not about, are you happy with this? Is everybody, it's about, did we get results? Did we achieve our goals? How was those goals achieved? And what do we do in the next steps? Everything that we do, those questions are asked. Matter of fact, how we are structured as far as staff, because that always gets asked when I do one of these presentations, you have me and our team at the chamber who work together all as one, but then we've hired a program manager. And all she does is wake up every single day thinking about the programs that we've set aside and how do we move those forward. And so that's so important that you have someone waking up every single day focused on moving the needle. Not putting together meetings, not raising money. That's what we do as a chamber staff. We have somebody that wakes up every single day moving the needle. And that's what's so important. Some other things that are going to impact all of us is the SB 90 that's been introduced. Hopefully that's going to be the apprenticeship bill. That's going to impact this group as well. And then also the funding hopefully with 604, which is going to help some of our steel industries. I know Fayette and some of the others. Now, I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm going to skip this. And let's talk about some of these projects. You know, I can stand up and say, hey, this is a great model. This really works. And you guys say, yeah, we've tried that before. Let me show you how it does work, okay? In our Brookwood Logistics Center, you see our partners right there. The county schools, West Alabama Works, Mercedes-Benz, BLG, ARD Logistics, Shelton State, Core Focus, and we've got many more, AIDT and several others. This is the Brookwood High School. Several months ago, when I say several months ago, it was about 11 months ago, the superintendent at that time walked into one of our cluster meetings, our automotive cluster meetings, and said, guys, I don't know what to say in this meeting, but I've got a high school that I just built a new, and I got an old center over there that we're thinking about tearing down. Do y'all want to do anything with it? And she stepped back. Don't say that stuff to me. So we put a task force together. We are now launching, and hopefully in August 1, we already have a program that's in the schools, but August 1 it'll have facility, flesh on the facility. It's going to be an automotive logistics center that we're taking the old gymnasium of an old dilapidated abandoned school, and we're creating a Mercedes and automotive logistics center. Shelton State has partnered with us. We now have a short-term certificate program, and then we're going to have a AS degree that hopefully will be launched in August. So we'll have students that are going through this program during the day, getting dual enrollment with a teacher from Shelton State that will be in this building, 4 employees, 2 from BLG, 2 from ARD, which is actually teaching the core class for the kids. Their safety managers will be in there completely outfitting and making sure everything is safe. It will look exactly like the logistics center that's at Mercedes-Benz. And so through that, you'll have kids getting dual enrollment credit that will be able to move straight from a high school graduate to a entry level or a supervisory position, and then can also go in and have half of their AS degree and graduate with all the credentials needed to start immediately. That's what this center is built, and it's all about cluster work and how they work together. So as you see, not only are we looking at that, this is kind of what it looks like on the inside with the high racks and everything, but also what we have here is we're going to have an early childhood development, auto assembly. We're also going to have culinary and hospitality. All of those will be running, and all of that came from a superintendent understanding what we're doing and saying, what do you want to do with this building? And that's how our workforce system works. And I won't take a lot of time in this, but let's talk about regional outreach. One of the key issues that we have in our region is how do you get education? Dr. Lee? What's one of the biggest issues of getting students educated in our outlying region?
Getting them here.
Transportation. Have y'all in your work ever had that problem? Well, guess what we do? What's the traditional way of doing it? Well, we can do some outreach. We can maybe do some things to help. Maybe we can get a grant to have a van bring them in. Well, we stopped thinking that way, and if that's a key issue, then what we're going to do is we actually received a grant. This is a mobile training unit. It's outfitted with 25 laptop computers, all with cell service. They're all, as soon as you pop them up, they're online. What happens is this goes straight into a community center, and we teach night classes and ready to work soft skills. And we are also looking at the first teaching unit being an intro to truck driving. What a great opportunity for people who maybe don't have their high school degree, but they can be a truck driver. We're going to go into those communities and start that training. And I'm hoping that Bevel Max is going to be the next one that creates a West AlabamaWorks Ready to Work van. But this was a partnership with Shelton. And just to let you know that it's not just a thought, it's a reality. The press conference is this Friday that we introduce it to the community. This right here is another bragging point. It's the same thing of partnerships. Max has worked very hard at working with us and making sure that we have one of the key issues in some of the other outlying counties is welding. So Max received a grant for this. This is the welding units. So what we're doing is we're taking education out to the rural counties, because this is the deal. In our region, with 14,000 by 2020, we've got to understand that we have got to go into the highways and byways. And we've got to go out there and we've got to find the workers, we've got to train the workers, we've got to transform our poor communities that maybe don't feel like they have hope, maybe feel like they haven't had a lot of attention. And I promise you, we are doing that in our region, and we're focused on everyone, not just our key metropolitan areas. Here's another thing that we had that was a key issue, is in our automotive cluster, we found out through that cluster and them working together that one of the big issues was temporary employees and the turnover rate that they had. Now this is in our region. It doesn't have anything to do with any other region, but this is because we had a huge OEM. Through that, we saw that the temporary employees were constant churn. They would a company would take them and put them in company A. They'd stay there for 30 to 45 days, and then they would be fired. Then they wouldn't do any retraining. What would they do? They'd put them in company B, and then they'd put them in company C. And the list goes on and on. So we had a huge demographic of individuals who just bounced from job to job to job. And you guys know this in industry. When you look at a resume and you see that, that's a big flag, right? So it does those individuals no good in looking at a long-term career opportunity. So what we did was we partnered with ARD Logistics as one of our test programs, and we partnered with Shelton State, and we went and we came together as a task force, and we said, how do we change this? We developed a hybrid ready-to-work program where Shelton went into ARD Logistics and actually did the training inside the industry. Through that, we took their temporary employees from an 83% retention rate to a 33% retention rate. That's huge to the bottom line. And here's the chart where you can see the differences, where we go from 83% down to 33%. That is life-changing to now listen to this, not to the supplier. Who does the supplier shut down? Mercedes. So they are very involved and engaged in this. Here's some other charts where you can see some of the results from those programs. And I won't take a lot of time, but you can see the differences between traditional, blended temps and their average employee attendance. All of those, through those blended programs, we had much better success. Here's another one where we had that same problem. So what we did was we actually brought the cluster together, and we said, if it's a problem, tell us what you need. So what they did was they took our Ready to Work program and they said, these are the things that we need people to know before they enter our buildings. So now what we're doing is partnering with our temp agencies and basically saying, guys, this is what we want to see you doing before you're placing anyone. And so now we have West Alabama Works certified temporary agencies that have agreed to do this type of training before they ever place an employee. What do you think about that? If you're temp agency, you're probably saying, But if you're an employer, you're probably saying that's exactly what we need, because that's where some of our key issues are, especially if you want those temporary employees to go from temp to perm. And that's what it's all about. So that's what we're working on. Our other regional outreaches, you'll see all the things that we're doing, meeting with other other counties with their leadership. We're doing different trade fairs, career fairs, and one of the things that we're most successful at is what we call hiring fairs. We had one hiring fair, we had over 2,400 that came to that. We interviewed 1,600 individuals. I think we met a national record in 4 hours, and we hired 600 on the spot. So 600 individuals starting at 8 o'clock didn't have a job, and by noon 600 individuals had a job at a Mercedes supplier. So those are the types of things we're doing. Here's some of the grants. Our apprenticeship program is launching. It kind of talks about that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is what I'm showing you is what our regional workforce meeting was last month. So we talked about this. Our Worlds of Work Expo, some of you have came to that. You see that. We had over 4,000 8th graders, 900 plus 9th through 12th graders. We had 43 schools across 9 counties, 112 industries, 925 volunteers. This is that pipeline, helping kids and parents understand what it means to have a career technical pathway and what a real career pathway is all about. So here's some of the things we also integrate into our school systems, and we do surveys. These are some of the things that we use in social media. We have, if y'all would like to see it, worldsofwork.com. It is a site that you can go in, and teachers, if you're in the room, you can use that right now, because a lot of the things in our industries are the same. So teachers can use this. It has videos, it has information, it has jobs, what is actually out there, what it costs if you want to go in a particular job, what does it take to get into that job, and the matrix is also a pathway where students can go through. Here's the job fair that we had just a couple of weeks ago. Here's the important part of what we're doing now. Right now when you see this, you see all those individuals, this picture is the most important. That is folks who are going through what we call our Career Connect system that we've developed. At the event, we had 604. At the event, 335 of those individuals put in their own information, and now we're tracking them. I'll tell you this, the way our system works, within 48 hours, all 604 of those individuals are now being tracked in our system. One of the things that we're committed to in our region is that no one falls through the cracks. How many of you have ever been involved in a career expo or career fair? Anybody? Y'all all act like you're scared. I'm not going to point you out, I promise you. But as you look at this, how many of you know where every one of those individuals that walk through that door is? Wow. We have all kind of money, we have all kind of processes, we have all kind of committees, we have everything. But what I'm more concerned about is if John Doe that walks in that door didn't get a job, where's John Doe at today? And we have a system that we've developed to actually track everything about John Doe. Matter of fact, Shelton State is even using this as their adult, I don't know what the word is, but they track their adult education system through this. So what we have is complete information on over 2,800 individuals that we're tracking right now that do not have a job. We know whether they need to be in a GED program, in a ready-to-work program. We've also got navigators who we're partnering with the University of Alabama that's calling these individuals 50 at a time and actually helping them through the process, hand-holding them, because a lot of our folks who are in this system are at risk. And those at-risk programs are the people are the ones who are on the unemployment list, who are also the ones who are where? On our government programs, and who also are only one step, and this is not being negative about an individual, but one step from incarceration. Could you imagine the transformational things that we can do if we get this right with our state of Alabama? It will be transformational to our poverty-stricken counties that we can't reach out to. We'll change the way Alabama looks at its people. We'll change the way that this country looks at Alabamians. That is already taking place with the industry that's coming in and the great things that we're doing. But this is the way that you transform communities. We can give them every subsidy that we possibly can, but until we give them a job, until we give them hope, until we give them the help that they need to get on that career path and understand that it's possible, that's when we start changing Region 1. So those are some of the things that we did. I want you just to kind of see that. To see what we're working on and how we've been doing it. And if we have time, Lisa, I'll be more than happy to answer some questions. Do not be scared to ask me a question. And this is the other thing. If you want to say, well, this might not be politically correct, I'm the person that you want to ask that question to. All right? Yes, sir.
We have a lot of smaller companies here. We've lost a lot of the big ones. We have, and some of the companies we have are growing great. How do you recruit the best core of industry to make this happen? And what's in it for me question that they're going to ask, and what do we give them back as an answer?
Okay. Well, my first question, and this is one of the things that we've had to do, because like I said, guys, when we started, our room didn't look any different than this. Actually, our room looked worse than this. We had over 50 with only 3 industries. There needs to be a couple of lunches that take place, sir. And there needs to be some industry leaders that come together and say, not only do we want to transform our company and make sure that we're viable for the coming years, but we also want to transform our community. And if that takes place and you get leaders that will come together and will say as industry leaders, and I think your chamber has a very strong role to play in that. Right? Back there in the corner? But I think they do. That's how you're going to transform this workforce system. It has got to be industry-led. Now, I will say this. If you don't have industry leaders that are willing to do that, you're going to be right here in 2 years having the same discussion. And I don't mean that to be ugly or anything, but that's the truth of the matter. I mean, how many of you guys have been in workforce or in this area of work more than 5 or 6 years? Anybody in here? How many of you have heard this same story? Hey, the state's got a brand new initiative. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to have workforce regions. Or you have another memo that comes out and says, hey, we're going to reconstitute the workforce. Hey, we're going to recodify. Hey, we're going to move them from AIDT to Commerce. We're going to move them to ADECO. We're going to move them back to post-secondary. And how many of you have heard that? The only thing that is a constant when dealing with workforce is you guys, is industry. And that constant has to be solidified through you guys coming together and saying, we are going to step up to the plate because we're tired of the churn, we're tired of the turnover rate. Imagine if you had a 20% turnover rate and you moved it to a 10% turnover rate. What would that mean to your company? Those are the questions and the hard questions that we've had to have one-on-one with industry leaders. I don't have those conversations anymore. I just told you who's on my board. They do those conversations. And now industry is coming to us saying, we better get on board because these guys are going to get their employees, right? I need to make sure that I'm getting mine. So as you build success and results, it will churn more and more involvement and engagement. And it doesn't matter, and here's what I tell people all the time, because I have people that talk about small and medium-sized businesses, and they ask me this in workforce development all the time. And this is the way that I answer that. It's not that a lot of times when we talk about Mercedes and all these big programs, if you have a logistics need in a small business, guess what you need to do? Pull from that group, right? And so, but here's the other thing that I always tell them. Mercedes-Benz, many of you know, just announced a $1.3 billion expansion. Lear, S&P are going to hire over 1,500 employees with the expansion, plus Mercedes probably another 200 or 300, and the list goes on with the other suppliers growing. Where do you think they're going to get those current employees? The newspaper? No, they're going to get them from our small businesses. And what would it do to a small business if they lose 2 managers or 2 of their highly skilled employees? It can cripple them. So what we're doing is not, and this is my chamber hat being put on, what we're doing in workforce development from a chamber's perspective is not catering to big business. We're looking at the future to the survival of our small mom and pop businesses and our medium-sized businesses, because that's the lifeblood of our community. And Jason Hoff at Mercedes, he'll know that I'll say that any day and any time. And one of the reasons that Mercedes, and he says this, one of the reasons that Mercedes is so involved in workforce development is because they understand that it impacts the entire community, not just their bottom line. So I don't know if that answers, I know that was a long way around it, but I hope that answers your question.
What's the incentive though? How do we, if they're reluctant to come,
right?
How do we entice them, if you will, just over and over again, just ask them to sit down?
Okay, well, here's my personality, and that's probably a bad thing. Don't do what Donny does, okay? But somebody asked me one time, they said, what's the cost? You know, I'm a business leader. What's the cost if I get involved in that? I said, well, you answered the question for me first. What's the cost if you don't? That make sense? What's the cost if we don't do this for our community? Because I'm going to tell you something, and this is a challenge to every single one of you in this room. I am committed, and my board is committed, and my steering committee is committed, and my clusters are committed to make Region 3 the best place in Alabama to work. So you guys keep on doing nothing, and I'm going to do everything I can to take every one of your skilled employees and move them to West Alabama. I told you I was going to make everybody mad in the room, didn't I? Do you see what I'm saying? What's the cost of doing nothing? If we continue, what's the cost? We lost some of our larger employers. What's the cost if we try to recruit them in a new employer in 5 years and we can't show them a positive, strong workforce development system? Because I'm going to tell you something. If you guys are in industrial recruitment, the days of having a spec building and having a pad and a shovel ready is not priority number one if you talk to anybody with Site Selection Magazine or anybody else. Do you want to know what the number one thing that they're looking for? Is workforce. And not only workforce and a qualified and a quantified workforce, but it is also a system that shows that we are going to be able to produce the workforce that you need. So once again, the question is what if we're going to grow our community, if my business is going to be viable? Because when you look at that number that I showed and that deficit that we're going to have, what that means is for you to keep your employees long term, it's going to be harder and harder for you to do. Here's the other thing that is one of the hardest things to do. It's this book. Can everybody see that? It says, not everyone gets a trophy. I'll tell you a little funny story. My fourth grader was doing a book report, and he had to interview like 5 or 6 people and give quotes and do it in this presentation. And I had a bunch of teachers call me, and they were laughing at me, Facebooking my wife and all this kind of stuff. And they said this. They said, why did you tell your kid that? And I said, what are you talking about? Because Carter walked up to me one night and said, Dad, I got to interview you. You're the COO at the Chamber of Commerce. And he said, I need a quote from you. He said, what do you think about participation trophies? And I didn't think at all. I just popped off and I said, only losers like participation trophies. The title of the book, Not Everyone Gets a Trophy. Now look at, this is the most, how to manage the millennials. Guys, we have a lot of workforce issues that we have to overcome. One thing we don't need to overcome is fights and quarrels and turfs and everything else. We've got a big enough job with all of us working together, because it'll never work if we don't. So I would say this to everyone in the room, and I say this in love. If you're a provider, if you're a leader, if you're not willing to put your ego in the closet, you're not willing to say industry should lead and help get industry at the table, you might as well call it quits and change the name of the Workforce Council to the Kiwanis Club. And I mean that. You guys can make a difference that nobody else has. You have an opportunity right now where the state of Alabama is lined up, and you have Commerce, AIDT. These guys are willing to move mountains for you, to do what it takes. And I want to challenge you to be committed to do that, to be willing to do that, because when you're willing to do that, you will start seeing results like these. In 18 months, we took it from a committee to a council to a results-driven organization that's making a difference across the state of Alabama. And you can do it. Yes, sir.
If you could speak real fast to the purpose for why you went from council to organization. What was that? Do you mind sharing what that decision was like?
Well, it's not really a decision. It's more of a philosophy. It's still called the Region 3 Council. And we still have our committee meetings. But what's so funny is every single day I'm on the phone talking to somebody, one of my businesses, one of our members, one of our providers. An organization is something that's an amoeba. It's growing, it's ever communicating, it's ever moving forward. We call it our family of workforce development. On the way up here, just every day I talk to just about one of our nonprofit providers. On the way up here, I was talking to the interim president at Shelton State, Dr. Cynthia Anthony. I was talking to one of our, Sylvester Hester, the owner of ARD Logistics. An organization is something that's constant. If this group meets, do y'all meet monthly or quarterly? About quarterly? If you're just meeting quarterly and that's the only time that you find out what's going on, that's a council. An organization is one where you guys are talking and things are going on and there's constant communication. You see things going on websites. You have committee meetings. We average right now in our region about 40 workforce development meetings a month. That's task force, that's projects, all of those things that are going on. And Lisa can tell you because she comes to a lot of them. So there's constant meetings and communication that's taking place. That's the difference between an organization and a council. Yes, sir.
Follow up with Bud's question. I think we could explain what's in it for the industry. You know, the skills gap, the people
Right.
gap. I think it's more a matter of, I know the similar question is a comment to think about. How can we convince the industry that it's not all the providers' job to close that gap? We've got, if we can get industry involved, how they can actually get involved and how they can on the front end change that. I think that's what we're wrestling with.
And that's the hardest thing because they've heard this. I mean, let me digress for just a minute. What you're talking about is the same thing that rural communities in rural Alabama have heard all their life. Is anybody in an organization out in your rural counties? Does anybody help with them? Okay. Here's what they've heard for 30 years. Hey, I've got a suit on, I got a grant, and I have a suitcase and a PowerPoint, and I'm here to help. And so what happens when we go into those communities in our outreach? Do you think I wear a suit? I wear khakis and a polo shirt, and I have nothing to do with any organization. It's just Donny Jones coming in to see what he can do to help. That's how we go into the areas. Because we're not about, you know, the money, we're not about anything, we're about people. And that's why I said that 18 inches. Now let's go back to that. Industry has the same reservations. And that's why I said 5 or 6 of you guys are going to have to get around the table and say, we're going to be committed to this. That's exactly what happened to us. Then what we did was we started looking at results. One of our first big results was the Bama Dining Hiring Fair, where we hired that many people. We started our cluster and it was kind of, yeah, I'm coming because Mercedes is saying to come. And Jason Hoff asked me to come. And we said, what's your needs? And they started saying, well, I don't want to really tell my needs in front of my competitor over here and all this. And we said, okay, well, let's meet those. We started out, one of our first initiatives was that hiring fair. Now, we brought them to the table and what we saw was some transformational things where we had groups of about 10 or 15 businesses in the automotive cluster who was bidding for contracts. By the time we started, they wouldn't talk at all around the table. By the time we ended, they were laughing and they were handing different referrals to different employees to each other. And we hired 600 people. Now, what do you think? Lisa, what does our automotive cluster meeting look like now?
It's about like this. And they meet at 7:30 in the morning. It's a 2-hour drive for me.
Yeah.
Quite interesting, but it's
But would you not say that that's, when people ask you what does a cluster look like, where do y'all say go? Automotive cluster, because it's success driven. So it's not like you're going to send out an email to all these industries and they're just going, woof. I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy. But what happens is when you start being successful, success breeds participation. And so that will grow. So if you can get a few leaders that are committed to make this thing work, and then you get partners that are involved that says, look guys, and Andrea Mayfield, that was our president at Shelton at that time period, she actually came into a meeting and said, guys, it's not about us. We want to do what you need done. And I know that you have leadership in this community that has the same heart. And so what happened was industry said, okay, let's try this out. And because of that success, now they're getting more and more on board. And that's why you you saw about 925 volunteers and 112 businesses at the WOW event. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I would do.
I think that's our issue. We've got to
You got to,
let them realize you've got a responsibility to get involved in the front end.
Yeah.
And then you can get something done.
that's right. That's right.
We've got to,
Right. And some of them, it might not be the workforce. You might have to pull the chamber card and say, we need you to pay your civic rent. Give us a year as a leader and let us transform this community. And if it doesn't work, I tell people this all the time. I tell our donors that help fund us, if you don't see results, I'll give you your money back. So, I mean, that's how you need to approach it. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I work for Lauderdale County DHR. I help people that need jobs that are receiving welfare. So everybody say, well, these people aren't getting welfare. We do everything we can for people to get them working. We get them daycare, we get them cab service, we get them education. If they need GEDs, we put them in the career centers to make sure their resumes are pretty. We do everything we can to get them into the industry. Some of my people have felonies. They can't get jobs because some industry people will not hire them because of their felonies.
Had this conversation this week. Keep going.
So you know.
Yeah.
So my question is, I guess, mainly is, how can I better help my clients get their jobs? Because right now, I mainly deal with single females with 3, 4, 8 kids.
Absolutely.
Who's counting?
And yeah, and this is where, and this is not calling you out by any means, okay?
I'm used to it, though.
It's all right. What the question was a minute ago, what's the difference between a council and an organization? No longer is it the people I work with, it's the people now that we work with. And so what we do is we create things like this, which is called pathways. And we take individuals, and now we find out that, hey, look, a lot of these folks who have these issues and what we call our at-risk, and a lot of those are 18 to 29. And in some of our counties, from 18 to 29 in our male populations, you have a large percentage of that male population who has a felony charge. And that's something that I'll answer that in the second part. But here are some things that we looked at. And females, okay. So when we look at this, we begin to see a lot of our soft skill training is, if you're late, what happens to you? You get fired. If you don't show up and don't call in, you get what? If you punch the guy that's working in the line with you, what happens to you? You get fired. And so what we find in a lot of our training is don't. I teach my kids in our youth ministry, that's not what the world's about. It's about what you can do. So what we've done is we've taken, and Bob Johnson is phenomenal, he's one of our partners, and has developed this, but we talk about workplace character traits. Alertness versus carelessness. Attentive versus distractions. Dependability versus inconsistency. We talk about not why do you not show up on time, but why should you? And that you're a person of punctuality. You're a person of care. You're a person of dependability. A lot of people that we deal with, we grew up where our mom and daddies taught us that, right?
Work ethics.
We have a generation that has not had that opportunity. And we have to address it, we have to embrace it, and we have to understand. The second part of this is workplace competencies. You have essential skills, interview skills, compelling resumes, and you have education credentials, resume stacking. Now and I'll leave this with you. Okay? So, as we look at this, and that's what I want you guys to understand, this is not about what Region 3 does. This is not about look at what we're doing. This is about we're going to do whatever we can to help you. So if you need copies of any of our stuff, if we can help you with programs as you're getting together and your task force are working, we do this all the time. We've done a lot with Region 9. They have been wonderful to help us. Laura Chandler down in Region 9 in Mobile, we've stolen a lot of stuff from them, right? What I want to do is I want to steal everything I can from you guys that you do successful and make it better. I want you to take everything that we do and make it better, because I'm going to come right back and steal it from you, okay? So that's what we want to do. The second part of your question is, one of the things that we need to do as groups and our regional councils together is begin to work at those felony classifications and then educate our industries at the differences between felony classifications. So as we're working together, we work as one, not just regions, but all of us together collaboratively as the business community, as providers that says these are key needs, and we need to put teams together, because I can tell you, Lisa can say she sees me more than probably a lot of people, because we're down in Montgomery, me and Jim Page, working every day on legislative actions that deal with workforce transportation, those kind of things. We need to work together and educate one another on key issues, that being one of them. Felony issues in our rural counties are big issues for us, and if we can't get that addressed, here's the issue that I had with one of our OEMs. It's a federal trade zone. You cannot have a felon on that property. So what do? You don't look at what you can't do. You find the avenues of where they can work, and then you focus directly on that and hammer that and you work with your councils and your clusters to educate. If the construction cluster would be one of the key areas, which is one of your clusters, I think, or one of your areas, focus right there. Get them plugged in, get in that cluster, work with that cluster and say, look, we want to do this. We have this grant money to do OJT training. We'll help them. But we need you to accept them.
I got business cards if anybody need one.
All right. I think we're about out of time. One more question?
Sure, and I'll add one more thing.
Uh-huh.
As they say, we're gonna put him on the spot. If any of you are ever interested in attending a cluster group and just kind of really seeing it firsthand,
Absolutely.
we can definitely visit one.
Yep, absolutely.
And kind of see how they work and how they function and the dynamics and really what goes on in one. So if anyone is ever interested in attending one of those, call me, email me. My name is Lisa Rowland. I'm with the Department of Commerce. I work with the Regional Council, and that is my goal to help support all our partners, training providers, educators, business and industry, to really help and make sure everyone's engaged and connected. So give me a ring, call me. My phone number is 334-868-9099, and that's my cell, so it's with me all the time. And my email is lrowland, and that's LROLLAN @aidt.edu. And so definitely, you can give me a call or let me know, and we can put a group together, and we can go down there. Now, they are 7:30 meetings, but you can definitely work with Donny's group and see, what meetings are available and what we can attend, and you can kind of see how they work and what they do. So there's also those opportunities to kind of go out and see what others are doing and see how you can bring it back and make it your own.
Absolutely, and I would definitely encourage you guys to put a team together, to come down. I'd love to see all of you come down and visit and be a part of our worlds of work. If you ever experience that, it'll transform the way you look at career fairs. It really will. Last question. Anybody got one?
Hey, Don.
Yes, sir.
I want to speak for the industry. I'm a plant manager.
Mhm.
We do about $20 million in Russellville. Hopefully to go to $30 million.
That's awesome.
What you were saying, but, my question is, where do I get the welders? Where do I get the machinists? So industry is definitely interested. We just need that avenue where the new employees are coming from.
All right, here's the difference. Whoops, can you put me back up? Right down here, yep, oh, right there you go. All right, let's see if we can get there. You talked about welders. Here's the difference in the mentality of where we were versus where we are and where we're going, okay? And I hate to say that, but this is the reality. You're going to have to grow your own.
Correct.
Okay? So how do you do that? Through the cluster work, prime example. Let me get Max up here. Let me get him up here real quick. That's one right there. There's your other one. Bevel State already has this. Max, where's he at? Is he already gone? Y'all remind Max, don't let him use that anywhere but Fayette, okay? I'm joking. That right there.
Well, I just want to speak to their question. Is industry interested? If they're not, then they won't have a company in the next 10 years. So
That's right. You're exactly right.
those people that are interested.
Well, what if, let's just say, who in here is in economic development? Okay, all right. Let's just say that in Russellville, that they plop a golden dragon tomorrow. You won't know about it, will you? Because you're not on the team. You're going to read in the paper. What will happen to your business in 3 or 4 years? That's the question industry has to ask themselves as Alabama grows, as Alabama is more competitive, as Alabama moves forward. Are we going to be able to sustain ourselves during that growth? And are we putting the things in place that we need? We have that conversation every single day with an OEM that has over 15,000 employees shift that are working. That's where industry's got to understand the future of my company. All the time we'll talk about investment, in equipment, we'll talk about best practices, or ISO 9000, we'll talk about all those things. Number one is, where's our workforce coming from, and are they qualified, trained, and have the credentials to move my company forward? And that's really where we've got to change the focus. Okay? Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.